The devastating floods that hit the top of the South Island in August also destroyed the aquatic life in its rivers and estuaries. Scientists believe 80% of the fish in Nelson's Maitai River are likely dead and say it'll take years for it to recover. Alexa Cook has the story.
The Maitai River should be teeming with all sorts of life. But the August floods changed all that.
Very little life. I would expect to see a range of caddisflies, snails, perhaps some worms, some mayflies.
Those critters were stripped from their home when the meandering Maitai turned into a raging torrent, leaving an almighty mess and killing at least 80% of the eels, trout, whitebait and other fish living in it.
Pretty devastating. There won't be many fish in the river, I don't think, for a while, and very little to eat.
The surviving aquatic life now has no shelter or shade, only piles of sediment.
Through this, I'll hold the net if you like. You can have a look through the viewer and you can get a really good picture of the river bottom.
Hundreds of slips in the river's catchment run into it when it rains.
After small rains, it gets dirty again quite quickly. Thinking about the health of the river, it's something that will affect this river for a few years, I think, or maybe longer.
It's not just the region's rivers, but its estuaries and ocean too. This is what it usually looks like, and this is it after August's flood. Dirty sediment plumes all along the coastline.
We can see that a lot of that sediment has made it into Tasman Bay here and Golden Bay.
This is just one example of where August's floods have created dozens of slips and then washed that mud and debris down the hillside into the estuary, and this is the end result.
This is having an impact on the bays, and I know there's a lot of scientists around New Zealand kind of working on this problem and look at ways to try and reduce our impacts.
An impact that's really being felt in areas like Nelson's Haven estuary, where seagrass beds have shrunk because of sediment from flooding and slips.
Seagrass beds and just the mud in general trapped a lot of that here. So we experienced a lot of burial of the seagrass, and as a byproduct of that, we're seeing some biomass loss. So the cover of the seagrass is declining.
Bad news because seagrass is critical to the survival of many marine species and a refuge for young fish.
If these beds are reduced, then you could expect the adults to suffer as a byproduct because the numbers are going to decrease in that population. Well, seagrass beds also act as a carbon sink, so they have the ability to absorb CO2, which is incredibly important in the changing climate, the changing climate crisis.
But amid this crisis, there's also a glimmer of hope.
There's a little fish, there's little bullies there, so that's a good sign.
A sign the ecosystem is fighting back. Its recovery is already underway. Alexa Cook, Newshub.